Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we're discussing Surat. It's one of the buzziest films in the 2026 Oscar race. It's been shortlisted in 5 categories, including Best International Feature Film for Spain, Best Score, and Best Sound. It's pretty rare for the sound branch of the Academy to name an international film to their shortlist, and so I'm very excited to sit down and talk with the movie's creative team about the work. Joining us is writer, director, and producer Óliver Laxe, supervising sound editor Laia Casanovas, re-recording mixer Yasmina Praderas, and production sound mixer Amanda Villavieja. And because portions of this interview were recorded in Spanish, we also have interpreter Cordelia Montes, whose voiceover you will hear throughout the interview. Now, if you haven't seen Surat, it is a bleak, hypnotic thriller about a father searching for his missing adult daughter in the EDM rave scene in the Moroccan desert. But also, it is about so much more. It's also impossible to discuss this film without getting into some major plot points, so consider this your official spoiler alert. But if you've seen the film, you know how intense it is. I wanted to start our conversation by talking with director Óliver Laxe about the stunning visuals of the film, which everyone is paying a lot of attention to, but the sound in the film is also extraordinary. So I started by asking Óliver if he was thinking about sound as he wrote the script. Here's director Óliver Laxe.
You have to know that I started dancing the script. I was in raves all over Europe, and so I had the first images of the film. So I started dancing these images. So I can say that sound, it's related with the image since the beginning of this creative process. And at the same time, I'm a kind of frustrated musician. I have a musical sensitivity, sound sensitivity. My previous film, Fire Will Come, was also premiered in Cannes with the Best Soundtrack Prize award. So it's part of my sensitivity, I think, the sound. And also because I'm a filmmaker who wants to evoke transcendence in a way, who wants to evoke that this life is a mystery. So in a way, sound that is and the kind of sounds that we were using evoke this transcendence. I think the sounds that we were working for the sound, for the design, and also the music. Yes. And in a way we were working like sculptures in the sound. I mean, the words that we use to talk about sound and images are the same at the end. Color, brilliance, grain. I don't feel much as a filmmaker. I don't feel much the difference between working with images and with sound. It's about texture.
Óliver, I love that response, and Laia, that actually very neatly cues up my first question for you, which was, I'm curious, what were those original conversations with Óliver like? What was your reaction to the script? He talks about colors and textures, and I'm kind of curious about what that evoked for you and how you began the process of designing the sound for the film.
We first met in Barcelona also with Kending Ray, just to talk about the sonic wall of Sirât, how the music in the film should sound, and also how to have that kind of sound, because that sonic wall, that the music and the sound sounding the same. I think that we work a lot, and we were very concerned to have the same texture and frequencies on the sound effects, on the tracks and the atmosphere of the deserts that the music has. We talk about the grainy sound of the sand, the texture. Also, the image that has that kind of noise in the image. We have that kind of saturation and noise in the sound, just to have the same texture. and mixture with the image and music and sound.
I really appreciate you talking about the music and that kind of interplay between the music and the sound. I have some questions about that I want to come back to. But before we get into that, I'm curious. I want to hear a little bit about the production and the shooting of the film. Amanda, this question is for you. This cannot have been an easy shoot for you with the desert locations. And I mean, it looks like very harsh conditions in the film with wind and blowing sand. And so I'm just curious, how did you go about capturing clean production recordings in the locations?
En el caso de Sirât, creo que el
In the case with Surat, the main thing at the very beginning that we found that was really complicated was recording the dialogues within the trucks. At the end of the day, these dialogues that were happening inside the trucks became almost like another character in the film. So we had to set up the trucks in a way that we would be able to capture those sounds, to try to capture the sound directly and have it be viable. That was the main thing, the first thing that we encountered difficulties with. But in general, all of Óliver's films are quite the adventure. And you can't really separate, the work that you do in these spaces. At the beginning, once the location is identified, we have an idea of what we're getting into, but then we have to start looking at the specific variables. We're in a space that is very windy, and in the desert, you can go from complete silence into a storm. And trying to capture those sounds directly in the process as we're doing this, that was also quite a challenge.
Óliver, you said up top that you're interested in kind of using the filmmaker tools to build a transcendent experience. And one of the things that really struck me about your film from those opening moments is what you decide that the audience should hear and what the audience doesn't hear. You start with that really remarkable sequence with the speaker setup being put together, this massive speaker in the desert. And even in those moments, I was really struck by what I was hearing was really kind of close sounds of the speakers being assembled and kind of rubbing up against each other and this whole thing being put together, but not a lot of ambiances, there was no dialogue. There was no It really focused my attention on the work of putting this together. And then obviously in other parts of the film, you got these sequences where people are driving through the desert and it's very music driven, but not a lot of sound effects, not a lot of ambience. And so I'm kind of curious for you, can you talk about those decisions that you made, Óliver, about where to focus the sound in any given moment and how that worked for you?
So we wanted to make a film that is a genre film. And it's a film really inspired by the American cinema from the 70s, these road movies, crepuscular road movies. So in a way, Laia was key because she was very important because I come from a more underground cinema. I come also from documentary. I mean, I like reality. I like how things sound and how things are. I also shoot in film. I'm quite orthodox, a quite orthodox filmmaker. But we wanted to make a genre film. We wanted to make a popular film. We wanted to transcend also the cinephile audience. So I was afraid. I mean, the proposition of Laia was, okay, let's make things sound, and so that was the key, to make a sound that was crispy. Can I say crispy? That you really feel it. That, I mean, we are having an experience in the cinema. That is what I like. I like when you go to a theater and you feel with your body, with your skin, the images, the sound. That was the goal. But I was afraid of being too mainstream, for example, to lose my soul, So Laia, she was really important to give me confidence, to, I mean, you can say, Laia, sometimes I was afraid of if I was like betraying myself, And I think that I mean, we had to assume our sensitivity, our culture. The tailoring that we make in Europe is more sober. It doesn't mean you said, Glenn, that there are not much sounds. It doesn't mean that there is no work. I think Laia, she was working 9 months in this film. is something that I don't know in US. Really, I mean, in Spain, it's really difficult to have someone and a studio focus on a film for 9 months. And I started to be really confident when I saw her. Obviously, I'm working with Amanda from 3 films ago, so she knows about my adventures, my crazy films. But with Laia, was the first time that we were working together. So I started to be really confident, obviously, because of her intellectual point of view, and also because she was showing me sounds really natural, really naturalistic. The sounds that herself with her team were recording, and so that's the thing, to make something, to make a sound that you don't feel is there. You don't feel, I mean, that is just not fake. And I'm happy. I'm happy because this is it's not just a film, Surat. Thanks to the sound, it's a ceremony. It's totally a ceremony.
As Óliver said, it was very challenging because he comes from a school more documentary sound, and it was a challenge for me because I'm such a fan of genre movies, and we wanted to make an immersive and cinematic experience with all that elements that the genre has, but more in a realistic way. With all the sounds that we use were organic sounds. We made several recordings. We recorded a lot of different winds, also the engines of the tracks, just to have the perfect and suitable sound. And as you said, the first scene where they are putting the speakers, it's a statement of the sound in the film, because we were like trying to focus what do you hear, and not in a realistic way, but in an emotional way. It's not realistic how it sounds. It's very present, the sound of the speakers. It's just to recreate like a ritual. They are building the ritual of the rave, and I think that's the most challenging goal of Sirât. Has that kind of sound with several emotional intensities.
Vale.
First of all, the instructions that came from Óliver and Laia were very clear. We wanted to have an emotional and immersive journey from beginning to end. So from the very beginning, that 20-minute opening with the rave of the film, we were already thinking about how these things were getting integrated and how we were working with our internal dynamics in order to move forward with the narrative structure. And we did a lot of really fun mixes. We took a lot of risks as well as we were mixing the diegetics and the extra diegetics musics. We wanted to do it in an organic way that felt like we were presenting, or we were carving out the truth. We wanted the truth to come out. So those very first 20 minutes were an exercise of this. And then we have, as Luis comes in, and we bring in those additional sounds that Amanda has brought in, and we're starting to really mix those different types of sounds together and having them transition one into another. We played with this a lot in very different ways, and trying to find the mix that felt the most organic. The thing that was most present for us was that we were always we made sure that every decision that we made carried a lot of purpose with it.
So, Laia, you teed up the music and Kang Ding Ray's music previously, and I wanted to ask about that because it's such an extraordinary element of the track of Surat. This brings up a topic that we discuss a lot on this podcast, which is that sort of that fine line between sound design and music, and that kind of exciting space when sometimes you're not sure if what you're hearing is sound design or if it's coming from the score. So, Óliver, can you talk about sort of your process of collaboration between Kang Ding and Laia, and sort of what was your intentionality in using, sound design versus music, and how those elements, you kind of blurred that line?
As I said before, the distance between image and sound was not real. I mean, we were using the same words, the same vocabulary. It was the same between sound and music. In my first images I had, they were images shot in 16 millimeters, in 35. I didn't know which format I will use finally shooting, but so I had this grain in myself, I mean, I'm a filmmaker of images. First, I always the images. So I had these images of this truck crossing the desert and, like with a lot of dust, so in a way, these images of this dust, this grain in the image, I felt it a continuity through sound and through record. And that's the point, I think, of Sirât, that everything it's really, really, really linked on a really, as Yasmina and Laia said, and I think Amanda also used this word, on a really organic way, This is the secret, I think, of Sirât, that we, for example, Laia and David. David is an architect. He studied architecture. Laia is also a little bit filmmaker. I mean, it was really our sensitivity. I think it's quite complex. So yes, that's the result of this teamwork.
Laia, tell me about that process of working with the music. Did you have the music before you kind of started working on the sound design, or what was the process for you and the interplay between those elements?
Yes, we work very close with Kang Ding Ray and Óliver also.
We are slow filmmakers. We take our time. We make one film each 5 years, kind of. So I had time to work with David, with Kang Ding Ray. I mean, we were working 1.5 years before on the record of the film. So when we started to work with you, Laia, I think like 90% of the final sound was already done.
I remember watching the first cut, and there was a lot of music done already. But in all the process, you made some updates, some arrangements in the music. In the rave scenes, you work a lot because we needed to match the BPMs of the music of the rave scenes, that they were dancing with the BPMs in the final mix of the film. And it was very inspiring to have the music with that powerful bass to construct all the sound effects and all the atmospheres in the film, just to have the same texture and the same sonic world in the music and also in the sound design, and mix it just to have that what you were saying, the feeling that you don't know when it's sound design and when it's music, that kind of straight line.
So Amanda, tell us a little bit about the process of capturing the dance, the rave sequences during production. I'm curious, Laia, you just said matching the beats per minute. Were you using were those the final tracks that ended up in the film that you shot to, or were they replaced later on, or kind of like, because obviously the way that people are moving and they're responding to the music makes me feel like you were really blasting them with music during production.
En el caso de la
In the case of the rave, the production design had to be done really carefully. There's a prep that happens prior to the rave, and it's really thought of much like Oliver was saying before, like an architecture. And these prior moments are really important to capture all of the different sounds, the atmospheric sounds, and being able to collect all of these sounds sort of like separately, so that after that, sound design can kind of dosify and construct the final sound. Then after that pre sort of time that we have prior to the rave, we have the actual rave. And once that rave starts, it cannot end. We cannot stop it. And we want to bring in elements that can be used in post-production. So the sounds that we capture are also reference sounds, because we want the sound design team to be able to leverage those reference sounds as they're constructing their own sounds. So once you enter the dance floor, once you enter the rave, it doesn't allow for any other perception. So the perception that we have is through the rhythm. There's also lots of other sounds that we're able to capture. So for example, Sergey has a microphone, and depending on where the microphone is, little dialogues can also happen. If you have also the trucks that are surrounding the rave, so if you point the microphone in a certain way, you can capture a sound that is happening a little bit outside the rave, but while still collecting that ambient sound. So we want to capture all of that texture, so that the team can then reference and be able to sort of have that inside the rave sound, and then that outside the rave sound, and be able to mix those together.
It's important that you know that it was a real rave. That's the thing. I don't know if the audience know it. So that it was really tough. I mean, we were doing something that was never made in cinema, that is to shoot a rave, 3 days rave. Music is not stopping in any moment. That was the deal with the crews, with the ravers. So for Amanda, it was extremely difficult to do this.
Okay, I am having to put myself back in my chair. I cannot believe that was an actual real rave. I thought that was something you staged for the film. So you just shot a real rave for 3 days. So Laia, that means that this was a huge amount of work for you to then construct what we heard in the film. I'm amazed at that. So Laia, can you talk a little bit about that? And then Yasmina, obviously as well, the process of then you had to worldize that music and make it sound like it was happening in the desert as well.
Sí, el proceso de cómo.
So the process of recreating the world of the rave, we were always thinking of how did this sound, and thanks to the material that Amanda was able to record, we were able to really get a sense of what that sounded like and what that felt like. You have this wall of sound that does not allow communication. Once you enter into that rave area, the point is to people are going in there as the ceremony, but it also provided this great narrative potential that we wanted to make sure that we incorporated into the film. So we used equalizers for some of the final music that we got from David, but it still didn't feel real. It felt imposed. So we tried a few different things. We recorded all the music through sound. We added an LCR connector, so we used a big speaker as well, like the ones that are used in the rave, and we had all of the ambisonic recordings as well. So we tried to play with all of these elements together to really create this three-dimensional space. There were voices that were pre-recorded that were captured by Amanda. So we have all of these different European languages that are getting spoken because, in this pre-rave sort of time when Amanda was creating these recordings from the different sort of groups that were there. We also got the sounds from the dogs, and all of that added to that essence. We actually also recorded individual sort of phrases using sound actors. So we brought in actors that recorded certain phrases in different languages, and that was brought in so that the audience they could come into the rave as they were accompanying Sergei and his son, and we treated these phrases as if they were objects that were also entering the rave. So we wanted to have this feeling of that was quite immersive.
El uso de los objetos
That's right. We used these objects really helped to define these sensations and this immersive sensation of it. And there was this collective sort of break with reality, and there you have these moments of dramatic work that the work that Laia did really worked in our favor, trying to mesh all of these elements together. It allowed us to get into the depth of the film.
I want to talk about the sequence on the mountain road and the way you use the sound to heighten the tension. The visuals are just stunning. You've got this caravan going on these little tiny roads, and the vistas are it's terrifying. They could fall off that mountain at any time. The sound design, I feel, really heightens that tension. So I want to talk about that. And then, of course, we have the accident that happens. And I feel like the sound is treated very differently after the accident. It becomes very naturalistic, almost very real, but also I feel like the sound design kind of undercuts the horror of what's happening in that moment and weirdly makes it even more horrible. And then obviously we never see the accident. We never see the aftermath of what happens, but we hear it. So Laia, I would love for you to talk a little bit about using the sound design to build the tension as we're on that road. And then tell me a little bit about how you put together the accident scene.
The scene that where they're going up that mountain, when we started, that's when we actually started working on the sound design, and it was really a key point where the film takes a turn. So we wanted the sound to also take a turn to that inner world. So we move from these realistic sounds into this design of sound that takes you into this interior sort of internal world. And we worked to build the tension as they were going up. So first you have all of the trucks that going up, so you have the engines roaring, and the hostility comes from them trying to decide if they're going to be joining this group. Once they join the group and they begin to become family with these ravers, the hostility turns towards the environment. So we're talking about the sounds of the structures, the wheels, the rocks that are falling off, that gives you this idea that they could fall into that abyss. And then when you have that final, when you have the accident, the music is quite naked. There is actually no music. You have this kind of silence. There's no music that actually highlights what's happening, because it's actually quite a very crude scene. So when we were thinking about how we wanted to show the sound of the fall, the discussion was about, do we want this to sound realistic, or do we want to add a little bit more of an effect? And we were afraid that if we added too much of an effect, that may take the audience out of it. So we needed to find a balance between these two.
Another key sequence for the sound design, by the time the surviving characters realize they're stuck in a literal minefield, we have already experienced so much horror that the tension becomes so suffocating at that point. Laia, tell me a little bit about crafting that scene in the open desert and how the sound design supports this feeling that everything is just going so horribly wrong.
It was challenging that scene because we had to construct all the anxiety and the emotion through the sound design.
Yeah, that final desert scene, it doesn't have a lot of sound construction. We really wanted it to be quite mental and for you to hear the turbulence of sound. So in order to highlight that silence, what you hear is, for example, you don't hear the wind, but you hear how the clothes sound in the wind, how the metal sounds in the wind when it's kind of like touching up on the trucks and that metal sound. We're thinking about, how do we highlight that sound? Then we have the construction of the explosions and trying to find that rhythm. We actually thought a lot about the Western genre when we were thinking about this, and as the trucks were coming in. We have that first explosion that happens with the truck, and in order to elongate and to create tension, we worked with capturing the sounds of like a failing engine and putting that in. That made it a little bit more acute, so that you don't know if the truck is going to break down or if there's an explosion coming. You don't know what it is that's gonna stop it. Then, when the explosion finally does happen, we didn't want it to kind of stop there and be too quick. So you also hear the debris and everything that is the aftermath of what happens after that explosion, and for you to hear how the truck begins to break down and then the fire. So we used an expansive wave in order to build that in. Yasmina?
Sí, un poquito por continuar.
Yes, and to build on what Laia was saying at the end, we really come back to that deconstructing part that is happening with the film as well, right? Over time, we start with the collective and we start deconstructing and getting into the intimate space of the characters. Silence is always full of meaning. And when we thought about the explosions, we didn't think that they should be this spectacular. We didn't want to emphasize the explosion. We thought about where does this fit in terms of the image and the sound. So with the wind and the storms, we didn't want them to come off as this spectacular thing, but rather something that became disorienting for our characters, that was reflecting their inner state of mind. The space of the wind and the distance also reflected that sense of loss, and you have these delays, right? That are marked by the distance of the characters in this kind of vast space where everything is laid out.
So, final question is really about how you use Dolby Atmos in the film. I think we're always kind of struggling with this, what I think is a misconception that Dolby Atmos is really just for big budget Hollywood studio blockbuster films. And I always say that Dolby Atmos is really for any time you want to take the audience on a journey and give them an experience of a specific place. And I think Surat uses Dolby Atmos so well. But for Laia and Yasmina, why was Dolby Atmos important for this film, and how did you use it?
Yes, I remember when I read the script, I called back to the producer and also Óliver, and I said to them, we had to do this film in Dolby Atmos because we need to have that tool to create that cinematic and immersive experience. We worked with the Atmos, all the sound design process, just to explore it to the max. We tried a lot of things, how everything can sound if we use the objects or if we work through the beds. Just to have that control of the sound in the three-dimensional space of the theater.
Bueno, utilizamos
I think, the sound is so central to the emotional experience of this film, and using Atmos really allowed us to have a lot more creativity to integrate the audience in a way that was really impactful. The use of subjects was really key for us, and I think we couldn't have done it without it. It was really a must-use for us.
That's fantastic. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you all on the Dolby podcast today. One of my producers has pointed out to me that if Surat does get nominated for Best Sound, it'll be a historic first, the first time that an all-female team has been nominated for a Sound Oscar, which is tremendously exciting, long overdue. So congratulations to all of you and to Óliver for putting this extraordinary team together. So congratulations and thank you again for coming on the Dolby podcast today to talk to us about Surat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Óliver, Laia, Yasmina, and Amanda for joining us on the podcast today. And a special thanks to Cordelia for doing that amazing job with the translations. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Neon for helping us put this conversation together, as well as for providing the clips from the film. Be sure to check out Surat, now in theaters in Dolby Atmos where available. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, especially as the Oscar race heats up, be sure you are subscribed to us here at Dolby Creator Talks. As we do every year, we will feature extended coverage with many of the nominees in several categories at the 98th Academy Awards here in Hollywood at the Dolby Theater on March 15th. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube and our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.